game. So advanced variation of Caro Kann, bishop f5 and c4. So actually before c4, I recommend white pushing the h pawn to expand our space, and black probably move the pawn to h5. Otherwise, if e6, g4, h5, the bishop will be trapped. So h5, and later we can play c4. And the reason we play h4 is once bishop moved to g6, so we can divide the rook from h3. So we didn't play h4, play c4, and e6, that's correct, to like support d5 and knight c3. So now white has two pieces targeting at d5. So in this particular position, since white has a pawn at c4, there could be a pawn exchange happening sooner or later. So we should think about, from black's perspective, how can we control or launch attack on the semi-open d file, and also probably we can move the knight to control the d5 square. And the best move turned out to be either like the bishop to b4 or knight e7. And the difference is, if you move the bishop out, then later you move the knight, you don't like block your bishop. I think that's better than move the knight like straight away. But knight e7 is still good. So for example, we can make a couple of moves. If bishop to b4, pin the knight. And from white's perspective, white could take the pawn, then we take it back. And from black's perspective, we're happy to see that, because we have a space for the b8 knight to move to c6 and later attack the d4 pawn. And if white doesn't take the pawn, for example, knight e2 to connect knights, and you can take the pawn because the bishop cannot protect that. If the knight move to f3, you can move knight to e7, and maybe bishop to e2. White has to develop bishop right and the castle, and white could probably castle. Now we can take the pawn, and if bishop take that, look at the d4 pawn. This is a target we can aim at. And since we already castle, we can push c5. We don't need to worry about this diagonal. We don't need to worry about our king at e8 and later knight to c6, and we can attack the center d4 and also threat to e5. And look at our bishops, both of them have been developed, and the knight can be connected. So this is a very good position for black to play. But in this game we play c5. So as I said, white has already two pieces aiming at d5, and look at the queen. If the d file is open, our d5 pawn will be a target. And white take the pawn, that's correct, and knight f3. So also we need to be aware from like this attack, because yeah, after c5, this diagonal is open, and it's a little awkward for black to retreat the bishop. So white can actually be very aggressive to attack the knight, to pin the knight. Bishop f4. I will move the light square bishop, to be honest. First, so we can castle and then move the rook to attack the king as quick as possible. And the dark square bishop to f4 is a little unnecessary. If we want to support the center, we can move the bishop to pin the knight. Because I know there is threat on d4, but we can pin the knight to reduce some pressure on the d4 pawn. Bishop f4, queen to b6. Still, I think black should consider the d5 pawn. It's under attack, and maybe we can close the center with c4, and that could be the way to go. But after queen d6, white can actually take the pawn, and also there's a knight c7. We cannot take the pawn. Knight c7, we will lose a rook. But white didn't notice this opportunity. Knight a4, queen c7, take the pawn, knight e7, bishop to e2. We develop bishop, we want to move the rook, castle, and move the rook out. I still think bishop b5 is better, because we can pin the knight. Queen a5, we can move the knight back, and later knight d4, we can attack the knight. And so as long as we have a knight and bishop aiming at the c6, this e7 knight cannot really move. And if the e6 the knight stay there for a long time, the dark square bishop will be blocked. So this is how we can keep adding pressure to our opponent. Knight g6, move the bishop back, and we're threatening e6. I think the queen has to move, maybe with a check. Oh, take the pawn. That's risky because we move our knight to very passive position. The knight will be pinned. So queen e5. So this is the way we can make the queen escape and check the king. For example, check the king, knight c3, and we can probably long castle or take the c5. Maybe long castle is better because we can protect the pawn. So take, the knight is pinned, queen d5. I think black will lose the knight. Check, knight back, and there are two pieces in a row. So yeah, no, f6 doesn't work neither because after exchange there's a fork, and after losing the bishop, I think black is like doesn't have any chance. Yeah, but I cannot really castle because black opened the center with the c5 too early, so that makes us like in the bad position. Yeah, bishop d6, that's good, and white win another piece. Yeah, so rook d3, threatening take the knight, and there's a check. Yeah, so we don't need to walk through the rest of the game. I think white is definitely winning. So I think the learning for both sides is in this position, black plays c5. Black want to attack the center, being active. It's good that we think like proactively, but the downside is if we really want to open the file, open the center, we need to ask ourselves, are we confident we can control the file or center we opened? So does this open favor us or our opponent? And if we look at the pieces, there are three pieces aiming at d5 if the d file was opened. So c5 is a move that is a little too early. So yeah, that's it.